Hello and welcome everyone to another Sales Hacker webinar. I can see everyone filling in now. This was a popular one, well over 500 folks on this one, so it's going to be a good one. This topic, something extremely near and dear to my heart, and one that frankly doesn't get discussed enough. And what we're talking about is how creativity is the new sales hack. And our promise to you is to not stay up here because this topic could be kind of philosophical, but we're gonna give you some actionable things, and we're gonna share strategies we use to be more creative, things we've seen out in the market, and that's our promise to you. And why we're talking about this is I read recently that 30% more emails are being sent since COVID started. I imagine you take any channel right now and it's noisier than ever. People don't know what to do. They still need to hit quotas. So connecting with prospects is harder than ever. And one of the key things that can make you stand out, it's the only emails I personally respond to, it's the only cold calls I respond to, are the ones that are different, unique, and creative. So that's why we're talking about it. I have the perfect lineup of people to discuss this. Before I introduce them, super quick housekeeping. So number one, these are all recorded. So you got to jump off. Your kid's screaming in the background. You got to go close the deal. It's all good. We'll have this in your inbox in about 24 hours. Second, I'm lucky enough to know these three people really well, and I could call and have a discussion about creativity with any of them anytime I wanted. So we do this for the community. We've got some talking points, some things we want to go over, but it's always the most fun for the panelists, for myself, when you're in the driver's seat. We've got a Q&A section at the bottom. Start peppering in those questions now. And, I've got some questions, but I'll hand you the reins if there's enough questions coming in. And then quickly also go to the chat and just introduce yourself. It's a lot more fun when we know who we're rocking with. Give us your name, title, what company you're with, say hello. And that's it. That's the boring stuff out of the way. Now I get to introduce my guests. I am joined by Chris Rudigrap, CEO of Sendoso, Jake Dunlap, CEO of Scaled, and Becc Holland, CEO and founder at Flip the Script. Chris, Jake, Becc, welcome.
Thank you so much, Scott.
Awesome. Looking forward to it, man.
Love it. Becc, I think that's the first time I've introduced you as a new CEO and founder, and that's really cool. Congratulations. That's awesome. Okay, so let's quickly go through. So for those joining us who maybe, live under a rock, they've never been on LinkedIn before, can you each give your super quick superhero origin story? I call it. Keep it like 2 minutes, who you are, how you all got to be CEOs at such cool, fast-growing companies. And Becc, let's start with you.
Awesome. I was hoping you would start with Jake so I could craft something up in my head. I'm like, start with the best, then with the least. Anywho, hi everyone on the line. My name is Becc Holland. I am the CEO of Flip the Script. My origin story is I'm really a salesperson, practitioner gone rogue. So I graduated from A&M, came in as an account executive, sold mechanical construction projects in Texas for about 5 years for a couple enterprise firms, and a SMB firm, and then transitioned out to the Bay Area and decided, because I didn't know what an API was or an SDK was. I thought an SDK was a sales development kit. True story. That's how much I knew about tech when I came to the Bay Area. And so
it's a good guess.
Yeah, right. I thought it was like a little welcome kit with some handy wipes and snacks or stuff for your first day. So anywho, I decided to take a step, quote unquote, back to be an SDR so I could learn the ecosystem before I started to close, and really fell in love with the program from there. So started to develop a lot of theories on why we were getting pretty good results, but not amazing results that I really wanted. And so I deployed a couple of those at a couple sales tech companies and decided to start a rogue, very appropriate Fight Club style, organic series after hours just for free to, help get out some of the methods that it had been helping my teams 3, 4X, 5X, 6X. And one SDR after hours basically said like, hey, you should name this thing. I said, what should we name it? And he said, flip the script. And I'm like, sold. It is flip the script. And so turn that into a more significant venture. So that is the origin story. Is someone random just said you should call it flip the script. And I said, okay, the series is forevermore known as Flip the Script. And now it is a full-blown media and training company that I've been running for the last couple of months.
Awesome. And congrats again. Huge step. Congrats on the new venture. And I've been asking this follow-up question recently. I'm not sure if I'm asking for the community or myself. How have you been staying sane through all the madness, Mike going into new lockdowns, all this stuff? What keeps Becc Holland mind sharp?
Oh, I'm having a blast. Meaning, COVID aside, this new venture for me has just been absolutely so much fun. And so I think it's that's really keeping me going. But I mean, true story, any single time I close a deal for either a sponsor or for any kind of consultant thing, there's like a Katy Perry dance party that happens for somewhere around 45 seconds to a minute, but I'm just having a blast. I mean, to be honest, so there's no real hack. For me, I'm getting to do something I never thought I would have the fortune to do and never have the opportunity to do in this significant of a way. So anywho, I know that's not helpful to anyone on the line, but Katy Perry is very, very helpful for 45 seconds to a minute to really get you jazzed up.
I like it. I'm hearing find meaning in your work. Find work that is meaningful for you. You won't need something to protect your mindset when you find that meaningful work. And, dance parties can never hurt. I remember back in the day, I used to have like a closing song too, that anytime I would close a deal, I'd play that song. I won't go into what it was because it's embarrassing, but anyway, next up, let's go, Chris, superhero origin story.
Cool. So I spent about 10 years as an account executive at various software companies in San Francisco. And that really turned me into figuring out this problem that I was facing at my last company, which was trying to get more creative, breaking out through that noise and send out direct mail and some different types of gifts. And that gave me the inspiration to start Sendoso. So one day I was an AE, the next day I was a CEO, and I've scaled up since. We've got about 300 plus employees in the last couple of years, and I'm having a blast doing it. So definitely a fun story, and love connecting with other AEs and inspiring other folks.
Incredible, man. It's been so amazing to see the rise of Sendoso. You guys are killing it and such a great partner. Same question to you, Chris. What's keeping you sane right now? I imagine running a 300-person organization can be stressful, added stress of outside pressures. What do you do to keep your cup full?
Yeah, so I'd probably say I got obsessed with like closing the rings for my Apple iWatch. So it's really the exercise, the standing, the walking. And I've taken it so far where my dog has this little whistle, which is kind of like a step tracker for her. And so I make sure she hits her steps too. So it keeps me busy. It makes me make sure I get outside, go on walks. I think exercise is great for stimulating your mental self and staying sane. So I think exercise is probably one of the biggest things that keeps me going.
I love that. I often say, I feel like for me personally, exercise is like the closest thing to a limitless pill that I have. I function so much better when I get my workout in. Mr. Jake Dunlap, last but certainly not least, superhero origin story.
So I was born in a rural town in Iowa. And then, like, that isn't that like a Superman? Isn't Superman something like that?
And then you got bit by a spider.
I did really.
I became Jake Dunlap.
I was born in a town of 800 people in Iowa. Thanks for having me. I'm excited. For those of you who don't know me, I run a consulting firm, Scaled. How I got here, started my sales career in Tampa with the Rays, worked in professional sports for a little bit, then got into tech in Phoenix, and then was the vice president of sales and success at Glassdoor. I built out the sales organization there, then went on to another startup, and then realized I'm a really bad employee and I'm really good at the work. Like I'm amazing at doing the work and building the teams and doing the work, but man, I sucked at politics and all this stuff. I'm like, so what's next? Is this my career now? I'm a VP of sales. I go and I get fired every 2 to 3 years, every single time. And like, this is my life for forever. Or yeah, hard no. So let me go do something else. So I started Scaled because what I saw is that companies had no support for sales. Marketing gets like a digital agency performance and there wasn't support for sales. So fast forward to today, we've got about 32 people, New York, Austin, a bunch of other places, doing a lot of work for early stage companies is almost like sales operations, sales enablement as a service. And then more strategic work, some like VP of sales as a service and like big projects with much larger companies. So I got here because I just was like, I'm not very good at this. I'm not good at this politics thing. And so why don't I just opt out of that and go do my own thing?
Love it. And same question, what's been keeping you sane through the madness?
Okay, I learned how to solve a Rubik's Cube. I can now solve a Rubik's Cube in 1 minute and 20 seconds is my record. And I also bought a guitar. So I started playing the guitar 4 weeks ago, right? And so that's what I've been doing, picking up random things. And so I turned 40, right? So this is my version of like a midlife crisis. So it's like, I'm going to learn how to go solve a Rubik's Cube and play the guitar. So that's what I've done.
Maybe you got to write a song about playing the Rubik's Cube on your guitar.
Mesh the
I'm not, man. Guitar is hard, man. It is hard.
Very hard. I've tried 4 times now, one with the teacher, one online. I get decently far. And then you can't stop though. That's my advice. If you stop, you'll forget everything. Okay. And then you have to start again.
You've got the right fingers for it. I can see your fingers. Like I got short fingers. Like you've got those like long, skinny fingers that can kind of like come around. Like
they're really broken though.
Oh wow. Okay. Well, that one probably is not helpful.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Let's dive right into it. Thank you all. We're honored to have all of you, and I think it's fitting that it's 3 CEOs on this panel. There's a certain level of course, creativity to imagine building, companies and your own thing. So this is awesome, all with great sales experience. Okay, let's start at the beginning. What does it even mean to be creative in sales and think outside the box? And let's go reverse order this time. Jake, I'll start with you.
All right, so I'm going to take you through a creativity journey and very quickly. Step 1 is you should have 0 creativity. So let me tell you what I mean by that. There are all kinds of amazing best practices that exist. Becc and I put out a lot of these, and Chris, for free online. We literally tell you like exactly what to do. Step 1, have 0 creativity, rip off best practices from everybody else. Then guess what? You just jumped ahead of everyone by 3 months once you started that new job. Okay, now you're 3 months ahead. Then you get a baseline. And then you always think, how can I break my baseline? So for me, it's about, but to me, I posted about this morning, it's about time. You have to make time to be creative and just think. And then guess what? Someone posts on LinkedIn a new play, go try it. Like, I think the key is I feel like it's easier to be creative if you're not focused on being the one who came up with a creative idea. Instead, you're the person who can iterate on it. And that's cool too, like that you're doing it. So for me, that's my kind of creativity thoughts is like rip off all best practices, learn from everybody else, and block time. Block time to go and look at, hey, what were your results for the last 3 weeks? Okay, did this. All right, let's go break some stuff. Let me go try something new for the next 3 weeks. A/B test. And so I feel like it's kind of like structured creativity, right? And that's kind of my process. And when I talk to people, that's my advice.
Yeah, it's great advice. I often say, you got to have a certain level of inputs to have outputs, right? So you got to be creating that content of all these other people that's going to allow you to connect things, which I think is really what creativity is really doing. You're just connecting one idea to another, and then it becomes this whole other thing. I like it. Becc, anything to add on top of that? Like, what does creativity mean to you? Obviously, you just went through this grueling, exercise of creating an incredible amount of content, all of which is creative. It's coming from your brain. A lot of this is new concepts, new ideas, improving on things. Where did that all come from? What was your process?
Yeah, I mean, where it all came from was a need. as I knew there was a need in the market. And for me originally of like, I was a practitioner and I just wanted to push more numbers, right? And I knew what I was doing or what was ironed out to me in terms of best in practice just wasn't working anymore. Or it wasn't working to the degree where I was really comfortable of like, hey, this is sustainable, it's predictable, it's repeatable, et cetera. And so the process, I mean, it's grueling from a perspective of, I think creating something, the reason that it's grueling is you're putting yourself out there, right, for everyone to judge. So, whenever I'm creating content, it's like, I feel like I told my parents, I feel like there's like nails being like scraped on the back of my skull whenever I'm doing it. But when I come back to that work and I revisit it, it's much easier to critique it. It's much easier to critique something else than to actually be the creator behind it. But what creativity means to me is I always like to focus on process. So I think people think of the traditional creativity whenever you bring up the word. So creativity as defined is just the imagination of original ideas. So it's like, whenever I think of that, I think of how can I enable my teams, or how can I enable reps at scale, or how can I, enable people to really put in their original ideas, but then hook it in a way that's very, very consistent across the team and then very, very scalable. So where that lies to me is process, and process isn't a extremely, I don't want to use this word, but sexy word whenever it comes to creativity. You don't typically think of that. But to me, the most creative ideas are process driven, because it enables something to be repeatable and predictable and scalable. So most of the creativity that I've done or been a part of is, how do I enable people through a KPI infrastructure or a sequence infrastructure or an activity structure, or you put the personalization here and this is how you hook it, this is where you hook it, and this is how much time you should take, and et cetera. Like it takes a departure from ideas if they are not working. So if I'm not hitting enough of my quota, then I have to scrap this original idea and say like, okay, I'm going to build from the bottom up, and I'm going to be open-ended on the data of whether this actually works or not, regardless of if the idea came from me or not. So I traditionally lean towards very inductive thinking of, instead of, creating a process and being deductive and saying, I'm going to push it onto my team and like beta test out what works, I'm going to go to Chris. Chris is a top performer. He is, very, very good at his job, and understand what he's doing and what motivates him and drives him. And how do I scale what Chris is doing, so that I'm starting with the actual experience with the tactical rep on the line. So most of the creativity that I do, was just enabling people that worked for me to be super creative, but also stay within structure and scale.
Yeah, interesting. And you and Jake kind of touched on two similar ideas, right? It's about creating process and structure around creativity. Being a creative sales rep doesn't mean I'm winging it all the time and I'm just doing my thing. Creativity is a luxury that you have to bake into a well-defined process. I like that. Chris,
Yeah.
what does creativity mean to you in the sales context?
Yeah, I think both Becc and Jake hit on it really well. I think it's knowing when to use technology and automations and software and processes, and knowing when to time block and use creativity interjected in there or at the right time, so that you can really double down your efforts and use tech when you need to, and use your human creativity to break through into new habits, to figure out new ways to break into accounts. And kind of think about it in that way. And I think time blocking is a great tactical way to think about it. I don't think that many people put 30 minutes on their time to be like creative ideas to break into these accounts. People are stuck into, okay, cold calling, then email, then this mode, not as time blocking, which I think is a good idea.
Yeah, it's an interesting point. A lot of people think, when they think automation, they think that it's sucking the human out of sales. But the more you can automate and the more you can make follow-up process, it allows you more time to be creative, not the opposite.
Exactly.
And I'll pull up this Naval Ravikant. I quote him way too much, but I love the way his brain works. And he's got a quote that says, "Creativity is the last frontier. Automation over a long enough period of time will replace every non-creative job." That's great news. That means that all of our basic needs are taken care of, and that remains for us to be creative, which is really what every human wants. And I couldn't agree with that more. And this is not in 5 years or 10 years. This is like probably 100, 150 years, but inevitably creativity is going to be the thing that we all, as humans, put our hat on at the end of the day. All right, let's keep this rolling. We already have good questions coming in. So true to what I said earlier, I'm just going to take these ones. This is an anonymous attendee. What does it mean to be creative on LinkedIn? Feels like that's where reps are willing to use the widest variety of approaches, but it can get unprofessional quick. How do you stay above the noise, yet stay professional in that channel specifically? Jake, let's go with you. So this balance between being creative, having your own thoughts, but staying professional, whatever that means.
Well, I mean, who defines professional? One, like, like that's immediately what jumped to mind is like, you're probably just holding your back and creating like a fake bar of what that is, so that's one thing is I would look to define what that even means. But here's what I would say. Too many people are focused on getting likes and not being a voice in their industry. If you want to be a sales voice, go sell into salespeople. That's what all three of us do. And we like to talk about sales a lot. We love it. So therefore, what do you think we post on LinkedIn? Advice for salespeople. Guess what? If I sold to in operations managers in industrial manufacturing, I would never talk about sales one time. I would only be putting out content for those people. But I think where people struggle is, but guess what? If I put out a sales tip, I get 50 likes. If I put out a tip for an operations leader at Honeywell, I get 5. But guess what? Is it the right 5? And so I feel like when it comes to LinkedIn in particular, engineer for your audience and become a resource. The same way that, guys, I mean, that's sales in general. Sales. You should be a resource for the people that you serve and the industry. So I think that's it, is that if you focus on having an insight or opinion, don't worry. I think it's like 3% of people post on LinkedIn. So you think that there's a lot of noise, but there's not. It's actually very quiet. And so that would be my advice is be very clear about who you want to reach, tune out the noise, tune out the likes, and start to produce content for those individuals. And then the most important part about LinkedIn is LinkedIn voicemail and LinkedIn video DMs. I'm telling you, I'm convinced if I was an SDR, I could work 1 hour a day. And I would just pull up, I'd connect with everybody. Boop, 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 boop. Maybe I'd throw in a little direct mail, of course, Chris, right? Like, but I would just be sending voicemails. But guess what? I can't track it. Guess what? I can't do this. So sales leaders hate it, right? But I just feel like there's so much opportunity to like, comment, follow with a cold call. There are so many stupid plays right now that you could be running from LinkedIn that the content is just one piece. So I want to call out that to me, the creativity is on both sides. It's how do you weave these things all together for when people aren't active on LinkedIn or they are. So I just feel like there's just so much opportunity right now on it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's some great points. Yeah, Chris, jump in.
One thing I've seen is just like some breaking up patterns of disruption and like what people are posting. One of my most liked and viewed posts was one where I had a video of the SDR team throwing water balloons at me. And it was a challenge of seeing if the execs or the SDRs could prospect more in the power hour. And so I think some of that is just showcasing your humanness. And in some cases, that can break up, the mundane feed and just get people to, see what you're up to and engage with you that way. I think from an SDR or AE perspective on outbounding through LinkedIn, I always, if you're going to just go cold on me, I prefer it if you researched a little bit and found 1 degree of connection or something relevant. And I think that there's so many connections to put the extra 15 minutes in to actually find a reason to reach out versus just a canned template makes all the difference. But it's time, but it's worth it.
Totally. Yeah. And that's interesting, Chris, because the water balloon video would not be seen, going back to the question, as quote unquote professional. Yet people really reacted to that in a positive way. So yeah, I think the lines of what it means to be professional are very blurry in my eyes. Becc, I know you have some thoughts here. Having known you, I know you like, there's certain etiquette, there's certain things that that you abide by and follow by? What are your thoughts here, being ultra creative and staying professional?
Yeah. So, when it comes to LinkedIn, I feel like that's kind of a separate bear, but I view social selling as three different things via LinkedIn. Number one, how can I create relative inbound interest via my own content, my own posts, if I were a rep. Number two, how can I outbound via LinkedIn as a medium? And then number three, how can I leverage LinkedIn, the data that's on LinkedIn, to fuel my other channels like email and cold call, et cetera. But regardless of whether it's cold call, cold email, et cetera, I think that the biggest trap for reps when it comes to standing out and breaking through the noise is that it's very easy to confuse being different with being silly. And so to me, I love this quote by Coco Chanel where she said, basically, to be irreplaceable, someone must always be different. And to me, being different and being casual and not formal and super silly are two very, very different topics that oftentimes get, really intertwined and confused. So most of the reps that I worked with, it's like, hey, you want to do something that's different where, let's take personalization as an example. Most people aren't doing it. So it's like, I'm talking all about your article. I'm tying it in a creative way. I'm making the hook, with your play on words, like I'm sending over content, et cetera, or being focused through gifting, et cetera, of like, hey, I noticed that you liked, wine. Here's a wine narrator, that highlights the best flavors of your wine. What if you could highlight the best flavors of your sales conversation? So that's a very, very different note to me than being silly. So I typically like to lead with a very, respectful approach of like, hey, I'm going to be buttoned up in what I say to you, but I'm going to try to say something that leaves a lasting impression and is very different than what other sales reps are doing. So I heard a sales trainer back in the day, and this was probably 12 years ago whenever I was originally selling, that basically said what all salespeople are doing, you want to do the opposite. So that doesn't necessarily mean sending over, like, this is just my opinion and just my perspective and taste is like gifts. I don't love, sending over, really silly videos. I just don't love it as a prospecting approach because I'm never positive of like, hey, okay, if I'm sending this over to a VP of sales over at Oracle, who's been in their career for 20 or 25 years. And the first thing that they see about me is that it's something, that's really off color, whatever. Like, I don't know how it's going to hit them. So I see social engagement of like, okay, I got 20,000 views on this post and I got 100 likes. Okay, so there's 19,900 people out there who saw the post, who didn't like it, who I don't know what they think about that post. So I'm always thinking through like, the eye of if I were, if someone who is a sales leader or an executive vice president at an enterprise company saw this post, what would if they're a very conservative, in terms of business, what would they think about this post? And how can I cater to both crowds of being different to both crowds, but also being very, buttoned up and respectful and making sure that they leave the conversation knowing that like I value them and I value their, I just don't like being in my sweatpants, like TLDR. I don't like being in my sweatpants, and I know it can work for some, and for some ICPs, but I always want to be very, very careful. And I think that there's a very, very untapped into vertical where you could be different all day long, but you still could be super respectful and not have to be the person sending over the meme.
Yeah. I like that, the difference between kind of different and silly. As you were saying that, I think I look at like the silly part of lazy creativity. It's easy to do something silly and stand out. It's hard to put on your hat and think for an hour and say, hold on, we've never used our VC connections before. Let's go do that. And I'm going to start that program and see if it works. That's still creativity working. You're doing something that people haven't thought of before. And I think the silly, goofy stuff is, just kind of lazy creativity.
So to your point, one of the templates that I've heard people not like is that you must be doing one of these three things. You're either off on an island somewhere, you got swallowed by a shark, or you just don't value data. Like, can you just tell me which option this is so I can update my CRM? I'm like, first of all, no way and HE double hockey sticks, you're going to update your CRM with that reason. Like, I just don't buy it. But I'm like, number two, I'm like, that's the template that people don't like. You know, that's the number one template that I've heard people not like. And so to your point, it's like, there's a way to infuse both and really, really stand out from the noise and do something that's different, you know, but also have my suit jacket on and make sure that you're conveying respect to the person.
Yeah. But man, did I laugh at that polar bear email like 7 years ago when I first got it. I did respond.
When you first got it.
One time. I love it. All right, let's keep these questions rolling. Thank you everyone for the great engagement through our chat. I am manning the Q&A for the questions, but keep the chat coming. I love it. Okay, let's go through examples. Creative LinkedIn or cold outbound approaches that got your attention and why. You are all CEOs now. You probably get hit up an absurd amount of times by just about every SDR and AE going. When's the last time you took a meeting and why was it? Let's go. Chris, I'll start with you.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm a sucker for getting gifts or getting direct mails just because it's like, I feel like you've done your homework, you know who I am. And so that is like 100%. If you send me something, I will respond. And I've seen a ton of interesting things from our customer side too, of like how they're getting creative with it. I think the new Cameo integration that we recently launched has driven a ton of new inspiration because you can really find a relatable celebrity or athlete and have them, you know, in turn create some unique content for you. So I think has been interesting. I saw one recently where someone put an email together that looked like almost like a MySpace. It was so different that caught my eye, where it was like flashy lights and like GIFs, and it was almost so different that I like had to take a second look at this because it reminded me of MySpace. But I think it goes back to, you know, how do you break out of the patterns a little bit?
Yeah. Sorry, you got to elaborate on that. Someone made a MySpace with your name
like
on it?
MySpace
that would work.
Like all these weird fonts and blinky lights and like some like GIF that would run around and this and that. It was kind of like that in an email. So yeah, I thought that was, you know, creative. It's some of the nostalgia stuff brings you back and, you know, helps drive responses.
Yeah. It's always interesting, this idea that like is the novelty factor, which novelty I think is different than creativity. You can do something that's kind of like, you know, crazy and it will work maybe a few times. But then you constantly have to keep innovating because someone's going to do it and then it will no longer work. But that's interesting. Jake, what about yourself? What are some things you're seeing? You mentioned a few, you know, you love a LinkedIn voice message, LinkedIn DM video. Anything else?
Yeah. Here's what I would say. I would say 95% roughly of outreach is just absolutely horrible. I mean, just literally no insights. Jake, it's scaled. You're a consulting firm. Guys, it's not personalization. What are you doing? Like, you know what I mean? Like, oh, wow. Thank you. And then you pitch me like helping with my app. I'm like, dude. So I feel like the bar right now is so low. It is so low that if you just do any, like, so for me, what stands out is, look, what do you know about me? Hey, Jake, I listened to this podcast and this podcast. These are my two takeaways. Boom, boom. Just go listen to, you know, like there's enough stuff. So I think that is, I'll tell you the most creative campaign we did with a client and it crushed 75% meeting rate is iPad waitlist management, a company called No Wait. They ended up selling to Yelp. And we direct mailed iPads with a pre-recorded video. We went and spent like $10,000 in a studio to do this, and the iPad, that's, you know, $300 investment, right? And we sent them to executives. It had a preloaded video that went, Chris, hey Chris, I love what the team at Buffalo Wild Wings is doing. I know your franchise and blah, blah, blah. Crushed it. Because guess what? What Becc said about the gifting, the problem with most people that do gifting, it's not relevant. We're an iPad waitlist manager. Like the iPad is relevant, right? And so that campaign crushed. And I feel like with gifting in particular, it can work really well. Be smart, not kitschy. Mm-hmm. Kitschy is what we're talking about here between relevant. Mm-hmm. It's not that hard. Just sit and think, okay, how can I make it? So the iPad campaign, that one really, really worked. And that's still one of my favorite campaigns we've done that just had stupid results.
One tactical piece,
Okay.
the podcast piece is there's a site called listennotes.com. That's a great that our team uses you can search for like a prospect, and then it brings up all the podcasts they're on and the content in it. So that's a cool tool if you're trying to leverage like the podcast play. So
Write that
Listen,
down.
I'm literally, I just got it.
Yeah.
I just got my notebook.
Yeah.
I'm writing it down. What was it called? Listen Now?
listennotes.com.
Listennotes.com.
So I could type in Jake Dunlap,
Yep.
and his
Oh, God.
podcast would come up.
Yeah.
Wow.
Oh God.
So
This was worth that's for me, this is worth the hour right there. That's huge. That's amazing. You could go and be like, hey, Jake, I listened to this and this. Here's how it pertains to, the product or service that I'm, that's cool. Beck, what's working for you? Have you taken any meetings recently? What got your attention?
Yeah. So when you asked the meeting question, I think that was a good question because I've only taken one meeting over the last, who knows, years.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll tell you what they did differently. It was shocking to me. And this was 2 weeks ago. So, and keep in mind, I'm like, whatever, personalization girl, coined as that. This person basically, they added me and they said, hey, did you know that when I dead on type, flip the script and Becc Holland in Google, your site still doesn't come up. So like if I hit that exact term, your site still doesn't come up. So I diagnosed this with my engineers of, why this could be going on because I've been following your content for a while. We diagnosed it to these 3 reasons. And I wanted to see if you had 30 minutes to where they could help unpack to you for free, like why that was happening and what you could do to alleviate it. And I was like, I have never met someone who built rapport more quickly than that person. And because they made me aware of something that was going on, that was a massive gap that I did not see. And then they made steps to make it better. And then they did it all for free. And I'm like, how can I help you? Like basically after the conversation, I'm like, how can I help you? I'll buy whatever you have. Like, I'll give you an introduction to whoever you want. And so I think, when it comes to personalization, a couple of the things that people have been coming back with, and my, reps on the teams that I've done it with, they're like, oh, well, I got all these great responses from people saying this is amazing. And I'm like, well, I'm not going to spiff you, with a gift card until they take the meeting. Meaning if they respond and they say, hey, this is great personalization, plus they take a meeting, then that's the opportunity for reward because that's what we're really after. We're not after, you can't pay rent, with, oh, this was a great email response. Like you pay rent through meetings and business use case. So I think that relevance we have a long way to go of how do we sequence people? How do we identify people? How do we segment people, not just based off of like tech stack, not just based off of industry vertical, not just based off of, firmographic setup or demographic setup or buyer persona, or to Jake's point, like role or name or title. How do we not just personalize to the actual title of someone, but how do we segment people based on pain? Probable pain, maybe there's a presence of a, negative output that you can see, or there's an absence of a positive input that you're looking for. But it's like, how can we segment people and get creative based on that? Because it's going to come down to, even if you personalize really, really well, but the person doesn't have the pain points that your product solves, they're going to say, hey, kid, that was a great email, but they're not going to take the meeting because why would they? Their time is valuable. And if you can't solve for something that they know that is a pain point or a low hanging fruit for them to make more money, make something faster, easier, better, etc., then like they're not going to spend the time, and they shouldn't. People are after, like, the videographer that I work with, it's like, he doesn't have to sell me. I call him when I'm ready to blitz out 60 videos. And it would, like, regardless of his sales process, I'm like, I have the pain of I need to blitz out 60 videos within 2 weeks. And so guess who's blowing who up? So it's like, I think that we need to insert a level of creativity into the pain bucket. And how can I start to segment people based on not only relevance to them in terms of wording, but like relevance to them in terms of, I have a likely guess that they are probably running into the pain points that my product solves for, because that's the relevance bucket, right? It's like that's when you're going to get a lion's share of responses. Is not only when you add the personalization, but when you add, you know, the creativity in there. So it's like, I'll say one last thing and then I'll be quiet. It's like, you know, high performing sequence for a lot of people is like, is there a relationship with the C-suite, my C-suite, with this other person? I'm like, yeah, you'll get the meeting, but you'll get the sale if you find a way to segment people based off of, they just blew their Q3 numbers and there's obviously a huge gap of something. You know, so I need to sell, you know, sales tech in there or sales training in there or process identification or something. It's like, you'll get the meeting in the first case scenario. That's going to be a successful campaign, but you're going to close more deals, you know, off of the ladder. So it's like, I think that there's a world where we intertwine, like, how can we leverage relationships, but how can we also really, really focus on the user group who would find a lot of value by alleviating the pain point that my product solves for.
Mm-hmm. I love that. A lot of gold and nuggets in that one. I mean, it's like, instead of spending your creativity thinking about, you know, cute strategies and tactics to get someone's attention, you know, spend it on, hey, how can we actually identify pain out there in the market, illuminate that pain quickly, effectively. Yeah, I think that's great. Okay, go into another question. This is an interesting one. I know my response. Priscilla's asking, what kind of voicemails will you all respond to, if any? Are voicemails worth leaving? I will quickly say, I don't listen to my voicemails. Back in the day when I was leaving a bunch of voicemails, I only did it to keep me sharp as a rep, so that when I eventually got someone on the line, I was like, at least in the game. That was the only reason I did it. It's the only reason I told my reps to do it, was to stay in kind of the game a little bit, and you just get more at bats. But that's my perspective. Chris, do you listen to voicemails ever?
I don't listen to them, but I do read them from time to time with the transcription. So I'll take a peek there. But I do see sometimes when someone leaves me a voicemail and follows it up with a LinkedIn message or an email, that I'm more likely to read that if there's some kind of reference there. So I don't think voicemails are dead by any means. I think with transcription, you can maybe get short and creative on it, or you can just combine it in a sequence of other things to make it just a referenceable mention.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like that. Maybe calling out the fact of, like, you're probably not listening to this, you're probably reading this right now. Just call that fact out would probably at least get someone to maybe read the rest. Jake, what do you think? You ever listen to them?
I'm on the exact bucket as Chris, you know, so I literally think Chris hit it on the head. It doesn't mean that you don't necessarily do it. I love what you said too about keeping you sharp, right? Because you got that rep who's been doing calls, then someone picks up and they look like they got punched in the mouth. Oh, hey, you know, like, so the voicemail gets you talking, you're not raspy. So, but no, I agree. It's just another little touch point. Who cares? It takes me an extra 20 seconds to just leave the voicemail. Like, just leave the voice. Like, so I think that it's just another add value add. I think Chris kind of summed up my thoughts on it.
All right, I'm going to switch the question on you, Becc, unless you have big thoughts around voicemails.
No, not too much. Why not? You're there. It's different. No one gets them.
Yeah.
I don't get them. I don't even get cold calls that much, so I would do it. Anywho,
that is crazy.
I'm just saying, I'm like,
yeah.
Hey, everyone gets LinkedIn messages and emails. So in reprehensity of being different, I mean, Chris, Jake, you tell me, you know, if I'm wrong. I'm like, I don't get that many cold calls. Nope. And I certainly don't get that many voicemails. So it's like, you have a pretty high chance. And especially if you're selling into sales, it's like, they always want to judge you in your approach. Right. So it's like, they'll always listen to it so they can show their team what you did good or bad, blah, 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 blah. Like the pain and also the pleasure and the opportunity in selling into sales. But I would do it. Why not? You're there. But
yeah.
I'm hungry.
That's a perfect segue to the next question, which I agree, which is, well, I probably get less than one cold call a day, maybe a couple a week, maybe 2 or 3 a week, but emails way too many a day.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's a good point. Get on the phone. And that bleeds into the next one. Creative cold call tips, please. What is the best way to navigate pushback and objections? Who wants to kick that one off? Becc, you're making a face. We'll give that one to you.
No, I'm just saying I'll kick it off. I wish I could ask the person a little bit more. So creativity over cold calls is a question. Are we talking objections? They're all very, very broad topics.
Yeah, the question was creative cold call tips, please, ! What is the best way to navigate pushback and objections?
Yeah, so I would say my most unique tip to people is, and you'll hear this a lot, this concept of like being human. To me, it's interesting of like actors and actresses, they are a great actress or someone no one's heard of based off of like a little way that they shift their eyes. And how do they do that effectively? And the reason that matters so much is because we can read people so well. We can see someone and be like, oh, they killed the person. They killed the person. And then we pick up the phone and we like sprint the opposite direction and don't read anything. The person's clearly, upset or running into something or excited to hear from us or trying to talk or done with the conversation. And it's like, we just sprint through all of that and we give them our elevator pitch and et cetera. So my like low hanging fruit to people is being okay with being polite, but direct and calling out the situation. Of like, I've done in sales cycles before where someone's like, okay, well, yeah, we'll read this and we'll get back to you. And I'd be like, hey, time out for a second. Can I just be real with you here? I think you're going to buy my competitor. Did I get that right? Am I insane in thinking that? And they're like, yeah, we're going to your competitor. I'm like, cool, no problem. Can you tell me, a little bit, where did I mess up? Because I'm like, can we like end scene, pause game and be like, hey, what's actually going on behind the curtain? Or I've been like, hey, can I ask you a question? You're not going to buy, are you? Like, let's just save our time. You don't have the budget, et cetera. Or like, I feel like I messed up here. I called you a couple of times, et cetera. And using that, leveraging that, what I would blanket under the quote unquote elephant in the room of like, I just call out, and I always soften with a line of like, correct me if I'm wrong, or maybe it's me and I'm getting the feeling, or it seems like, or it looks like. You don't want to be too accusatory, but like saying something of what your actual read is on the situation. And it's so pattern interrupting and bizarre to people because they're not used to, a salesperson doing that. They're used to the person just going ahead and going in through proposal and sending them, over the check, et cetera. So that is my biggest cold calling tip when it comes to objections, when it comes to just talking to someone in general, is being okay with being, very, very polite, but very, very direct of like, I just get the feeling that I messed up and I missed the boat here because I think that you're, I've even come to people in the beginning of the call. I've been like, so are you happy with the competitor they were using? They're like, yeah, we're super happy. I'm like, cool. So why am I on the phone? I'm like, do you just want a competitive quote so that they drop their price? And they're like, yeah, I do. I'm like, cool. I'll cut it in a quarter. I'll send it over. And so you can gouge them. I'm like, whatever. I'm like, I don't think, is there any case scenario that you're going to buy? And they're like, nah, not really. I'm like, cool. So why don't I just shoot you over that and we can give you back the hours? So that's always my biggest tip to people is be polite, be non-assumptive, but call out what you think is happening on the phone in the current situation. You'd be surprised at the results that you're going to get.
Totally. I love it. Be polite, be human, call out, the elephant in the room and kind of do almost the opposite of what they expect a quote unquote salesperson to do. Jake, same question at you. Cold call tips, what you've seen working. You said at the beginning when we were in the little pre-webinar that you love making cold calls, or you loved. Do you still love it?
Yeah, I still do. It's awesome. Like I love, like we have sports clients and there's Ticketmaster leads where you cold call people and try to get them to buy like small game packages. I love it. Like, so
when's the last
I'll
time
tell
you
you
sold,
this.
So have you sold some season
ticket packages? Well, we were doing it with the Jets. So the answer was no, we did not. But that's a whole other thing. I love those guys. So I'll tell you this. Look, I have a very specific process, and it's very simple, and I'll just give it to you. It is, hey, Becc, hey, and again, I'm from Missouri, right? So depending on where I'm calling, I can get Missouri, right? So like, it's like, hey, Becc, look, hey, I've talked to a couple different people at XYZ. They directed me to you. People love to help. Why? That's why I do it. People love help. They directed me. Do you take care of the recruitment advertising budget? Yes, I do. First, yes. Amazing. Look, Becc. And then here's the thing. You have to know your buyer personas. You have to know what's happening in their world with COVID going on. How is that affecting directors of recruitment advertising because of what's happening in COVID in the consumer packaged goods space? So I am an expert on my buyer. And therefore I go, great, Becc. Hey, look, so a lot of operations directors in CPG right now, I know you guys are in hard goods. They're really starting to think now about what happens post-COVID around XYZ thing. Like one little trend or something, I went and I Googled it. I Googled trends in consumer packaged goods, hard goods, and I got choices and I literally copied. And then I is that something that is top of mind for you? No. Then I go to my number 2. Well, great. Awesome. That's amazing. So, all right. So another big trend, a lot of the people that I work with, they're really starting to think about XYZ. Is that on the docket for 2021? No. Amazing. Then I go to number 3. My 3, because I know the trends of my buyers and I know the insights they're looking for. 3 no's, I'm out. Great. Sounds like you're good. If not, then after the second, yeah, Jake, that is. Well, great. So look, we work with a lot of operations directors. I know now is an interesting time. And we work to help them to do XYZ. What I want to do, and then you go straight into it. What I want to do is set up a quick 15-minute call. I'm actually out of the office the rest of this week. So maybe we can look at Wednesday. Worst case, I'll give you more of a competitive analysis of what other people are doing, and then we can see if it makes sense. No pause. Does that work for you, Becc? A cold call is a strategic conversation. I want you to listen to my tone. I slowed down for my natural speech cadence. Half the reason people don't book meetings on cold calls, hey, how are things? My wife got cold called. I did a post about this last week. My wife got cold called. The guy called up and is now a good time? I picked up the phone, dude. Stop asking. Is now a good time? Nothing screams salesperson is now a good time. Did I catch you at a good time? Dude, I picked up the phone. If it was a bad time, I wouldn't do it. Let's go, Tim. The guy then emailed my wife and apologized for how bad the cold call was. I'm sorry, that call was horrible. So you got to be confident. Look, again, hey, look, I've talked to a couple of people, Becc. Is this what you do? Yes. Look, a lot of very micro specific to the micro industry that she does and they do. They're experiencing this insight pain 3 to 6 months down the road. Nobody needs you to tell them what they're doing now. They've already made that decision. Executives meet when they get insights on the future. So that's it. That's what I do.
I like it. Good stuff there. And yeah, I think a lot of to kind of highlight something you said there, which I think is super important. A lot of the creativity in cold calls actually comes from trying different tonalities and different, like you said, that's where the creativity, you should always have at least a structure or a plan. If you're going in and be like, ooh, I'll just be creative on this, it's gonna go off.
I'll just tell you a real quick follow-up. So what I did in telemarketing, because you got to have fun with it too. I created alter egos. There was Dennis, and Dennis had a retainer. And it would break people up. I'm like, hi, Becc. This is Jake Dunlap with Grand Vacation. And people are like, what? You got to have fun when you're doing it too. That's my other advice on calling is, but you do. But again, but then I would test, what if I slow this part down? What if I speed this part up? And that's where we kind of landed at that, yes, close is a really good sequence and when to pause and when not to.
Totally. Yeah. And you have to find it for yourself. Exactly what Becc says isn't going to work for you. Exactly what Jake says isn't going to work for you. Exactly what Chris says is probably not going to work for you. You need to find exactly what is working with. There's frameworks, of course, everyone puts together. But okay, new question, Chris. I'm going to come with you on this one because I really like this. What do each of you do to build a culture of creativity in your sales teams? So, you're a leader, you believe in creativity, you want people to be their unique selves. That's why you hire them to bring that unique, person into your organization. How do you keep that going and allow people to be creative?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think we do it in a couple different ways. One, I think for, creative, interesting, like outbounding techniques and ideas that someone comes up with on the sales team. We have a separate growth team that's kind of like a little labs team to test stuff out in a bit more controlled environment and then pushes it back into the general team. So that's helped us have like a process to, leverage other folks' good ideas. Outside of that, I think it's, breaking up people's days and getting them aligned with other parts of the business. You have product feedback, if you have, maybe you want to guest post on marketing blog, or you want to be a part of a webinar. I think all these different things that you could be doing outside of your day can just be other means to drive creativity. And so giving the sales and SDR team that kind of access. I think for us, obviously, we dog food Sendoso a lot. That's a tool that our reps use to think creativity, and we give them kind of the keys to the kingdom, and then they can drive where they want with it. So I think enabling other tools as well, whether it's, especially in this virtual world where maybe a tool that's meant for design, like a mural or a Miro, maybe why not the sales team want to virtually whiteboard some ideas? And so I think, providing those kind of tools outside of just the normal day-to-day tech stack too.
Okay, I can't wait till virtual whiteboards everyone has one, and you can like share what you've written, and I can just like send my idea to Becc, and it like shows up on her whiteboard. That's gonna be cool. I like this idea of creating like almost a creativity engine where you can test ideas in a more controlled environment before you just roll it out. I think so many sales teams fall prey to like one person sends a video and happens to get a meeting, and it's not like a scientific experiment at all, not statistically significant. Then everyone's like, oh, we're doing that now, that's the thing. And you can waste so many hours. So I love this idea of do it in a controlled environment, actually get some statistically significant results, then roll it back out. Becc, same question. How have you fostered on the teams you've led, to everyone to embrace their creativity?
Yeah, so that's a great question. How I've really fostered it is by pooling them for ideas that not only for ideas of outreach, but ideas of like internal stuff that really matter to them. So it's like I would go into a room and I'd be like, hey, I need a new hook. You have till the end of the day. These are the rules. I'll leave you be. And I would walk out of the room. And by the end of the day, they would have 4 or 5 different ways on how to hook something. I'm like, these are the rules. This is what I need. This is when I need it by. And the culture that it created was they would come to Becc with some of these incredible ideas, and then they would see me implement some of them. Of like, oh, okay, I need to trim this one. This one's a bit too long. This one's a bit too, et cetera, or like, spiff ideas or account routing ideas or infrastructure for new sequences ideas or KPI system ideas. So they come with a problem of like, hey, my accounts are BS. And I'm like, well, how would you solve that if you were me? And they'd start thinking about it, and they'd be like, well, I think that you could route accounts like this. What if I had 100 that were ABM that were mapped to an AE, and 100 that were free flow where I could choose my own accounts and I could swipe them out. And I'm like, that's a great idea. Anyone have any kickbacks? No, let's roll it out. So they would see the imprint from a departmental level of like their ideas, and it started fueling the fire. So it's like, I don't know if you have, Scott, have you ever played the game HQ?
Have not, no.
Is that it, Chris? Have you?
Trivia game?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's a trivia game. Have you ever won HQ?
No.
So they have seen an incredible dump out of like everyone was in the app in the beginning, because it's basically a game, Scott, for context and anyone on the line. It's a game where they ask you 12 questions. And if you get all 12 questions right, it's kind of like Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. If you get all 12 questions right, then you get like a couple bucks or whatever. You like split the pot with all the other people who got it. The problem and the one flaw in the business system was no one ever won. So they saw massive influx of people that came into the app, and then they saw a massive outflux of people that they weren't engaging anymore because they played like 5, 10, 15 times they didn't win, and all of a sudden they don't want to be in the app because they never actually win. So I feel like an important piece of creativity when it comes to internal process, internal infrastructure, et cetera. Like, I want to hand the joystick over to my reps, not only for like outreach ideas and like how to be creative there and, you know, how to hook a premise, et cetera. But it's like the way that we do business is now different because of an idea that you had at 23 years old. So how much more likely are you to put into the pot? And I would say, you know, a lot of the time, I wouldn't use them all the time. You know, I didn't just blanket through these ideas, and I would add to them a lot and trim them a lot and combine them a lot. But I think when they see you start to implement some of their ideas from a process level that are major, you know, major imprints on how you do business as a company, and you highlight that to your CEO of like, hey, you know, these 5 sequence ideas or the idea for this team was actually created by Chris. All of a sudden Chris is like, heck yeah, like I just got visibility with my CEO, and what I said just made an impact, and it matters. And so that's how it's really like infusing that creative motion, is saying like, I want your ideas on bigger line items than just outreach. And then I'm going to include some of them into our roadmap. And so they're like, hey, that product feature came from an idea that we had in this boardroom. And so whenever that LinkedIn post goes live, they're sharing it around and they're like shooting it to their friends of like, I made a difference at the company that I work for. Cause I think, you know, I'll say this and then I'll be quiet for a bit. You know, everyone is looking to find nowadays, or at least from what I've seen, an impact in their work. Their work matters, either to their organization, to themselves, or you know, in best case scenario, both. So it's like, I give them that joystick of like, hey, without you, this idea wouldn't have existed and we would have been okay, but we wouldn't have been as great of a spot that we are now. So I want to leverage my employees and really empower them by saying like, hey, you know, here's the joystick, here's the standard. I need it by the end of the day, and they will, and at least in my experience, really come and deliver for you.
Totally.
Interesting thing there too is hiring some more of a diverse background people too, especially for the sales development team. Like we've hired a musician, a fisherman, and they have like their own perspectives and life stories that gets them thinking differently. So I think that, you know, for everyone trying to break into sales development or sales career, just because you don't have, you know, 5 years in sales experience doesn't mean you can't do it. And like, you know, leverage that as your advantage and showcase how you've been creative in your last endeavors and use that in your resume and in your interview process.
Totally.
Yeah. Great thoughts. Diversity is huge. Diversity of thought, gender, race, everything. Aaron Wells summed it up better. It gives the frontliners ownership and impact. Some of the greatest ideas come to the front end employees. So if you want to turn on that creativity spout, make sure that you're actually listening and taking those ideas and pushing them up. Well, I want to be respectful of everyone's time. We are 3 minutes over. Chris, Becc, Jake, thank you so much. That was as fun as I hoped it would be. And for all those who joined us, that was some of I think the most engagement we've had, at least in a very, very long time. Thank you for coming with the thoughtful questions, and we'll see you all next time.